Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We will be starting. Sorry for the little bit of delay. The today's topic is updates on anesthesia for non-obstetric surgery during pregnancy, and I am working as an assistant professor at Dow University of Health Sciences. So first of all, I have nothing to disclose, and the information which I am presenting today, it does not constitute any financial, legal, or professional advice. So as we talk about the non-obstetric surgery during pregnancy, it is relatively a common event, and 1 to 2% of the pregnant women undergo surgery during their obstetric period, and approximately 75,000 anesthetic per year have been reported in the European countries. So the type of surgeries which may the obstetric patient go through are the laparoscopic surgery, appendectomy being the most common one, these two being the most common one. After these are the ovarian cystectomies, trauma, oncologic surgery, craniotomy, and the cardiac surgery. So the special consideration which we will be looking about, and the updates which we will be seeing in these things are the effect of the physiologic changes on the anesthetic management, possible teratogenicity of the anesthetic drug, maintenance of the uteroplacental perfusion, and prevention of the premature labor. Teratogenicity and anesthetic drug are the factor influencing the teratogenic potential. We have to see these factors, and these factors are the species susceptibility, that is, in which species we are giving the drug, either it is human or animal. So we have to see the data, the analysis that has been done uh, before today about the species on which the drug has been used, the dose of the drug, duration
Sorry to
and
interrupt,
timing of.
Arsalan. Are you still on the first slide?
No, the slides are not moving now.
No, no, they were not moving and they are not moving right now. So you can
Oh,
click
oh,
it directly on the slide. Just use the side cursor and just click it directly. Yeah.
okay. So for the start, uh, these were the slides which you have been gone through so far, and now I will be discussing the teratogenicity and the anesthetic drug. So the factor that influence the teratogenic potential are the species susceptibility, dose of drug, duration and timing of exposure, and genetic predisposition. So when we talk about teratogenicity and the anesthetic drug, we must know that the manifestation of the teratogenicity is the structural abnormalities that can happen to the fetus, death of the fetus, growth restriction, and functional deficiencies that can occur. For example, behavior or learning problem that can occur in the newborn. And teratogenicity and the anesthetic drugs, the effect of the stage of the gestation at the time of exposure, it determines the target organ and type of severity of the defects, and most structural abnormalities occur from exposure during the organogenesis, that is the days 31 to 71, and the CNS structural abnormalities can occur later up to the 126 days of the development, and the functional deficiencies often associated with the exposure late in the pregnancies. Next, we will be seeing that teratogenicity and the anesthetic drug. Till now, there is no any prospective clinical studies being done today, because due to the nature of the population that in which we want to see the teratogenicity is the human population, and the outcome is their fetus. So there will be always an ethical issue that nobody will be participating in such study that leads to teratogenicity to their fetus. So we have the very small information available till date, and the information is based on the small animal studies and the outcome of the studies in the pregnant women undergoing surgeries, and surveys of the OR personnel that are pregnant. So they are going through the exposure of the different gases or different anesthesia substances, and then their outcomes have been noted. So as far as the FDA, Food and Drug Authority categories we use in pregnancy, Category A is the control studies, shows no risk in using those drugs. Category B is there is no evidence of risk in the human obstetric population receiving it and their consequences in their babies. C is the risk cannot be ruled out, and D is the positive evidence of risk. There is positive evidence of risk either to the mother or the baby, and the X category is the contraindicated category of the drug that are being used in the pregnancy. So luckily, currently we don't have any X category drug that we are giving in our general anesthetic or regional anesthetic as far as the recommendations and guidelines. So teratogenicity and the anesthetic drug, human teratogenicity has not been associated with any of the IV induction agent. As far as the IV induction agent, most of the drugs are from B or C category. Our neuromuscular blockers are also not being associated with any form of teratogenicity, and most of them are category C drugs. Opioids are still not associated with teratogenicity, but we have to make sure that we are giving opioid 4 to 6 hours before delivery, or quite a time has been left in the delivery of the fetus. So the category that in which the opioid falls are the B and C category, and the human teratogenicity is also not been associated with the local anesthetic, and most of the local anesthetics are from B and C category. As far as benzodiazepines are concerned, they are the drugs which are the category D drugs. And based on the retrospective surveys, uh, diazepam has been associated with the cleft lip and palate, and the large prospective study found no association between the diazepam and the cleft lip and palate, and no data to show single dose during anesthesia is harmful for the fetus. And whenever we have to give benzodiazepine to a obstetric patient who is going on a non-obstetric surgery, one must be weighing the risk versus benefits of the drug to be used. So this is a study which shows the use of the anxiety medication in the pregnancy with the mothers using SSRIs and the benzodiazepines, and this shows that the results were controversial. That benzodiazepine used during the pregnancy are somewhat controversial, and study suggests that there may be increased risk of cleft lip and palate associated with the first trimester exposure to these medications. But this risk appears to be relatively small, and this was a study that was done quite years back, about 2 decades back. But the recent data shows that the benzodiazepines are not being associated with such sort of things, and there is not very strong association. But there is an increased risk of preterm birth and a low birth weight, and causes neonatal symptoms. But there is no any teratogenic potential that is strong enough to show any cleft lip or palate. But there was a tentative association with pyloric stenosis and the alimentary tract atresia, and this needs further confirmation and further studies. So next drug we will be seeing for the same population will be the Sugammadex, and Sugammadex is the drug which encapsulates the progesterone hormone and reduces the free progesterone levels. And as progesterone is required for the endometrial decidualization in the and uterine growth in the early pregnancy, and in the later pregnancy it is involved in the myometrial quiescence and the cervical structural integrity. That is, the hormone is very very necessary to continue the pregnancy in the normal way. So this can cause teratogenicity and miscarriages, but the recent data has very limited to offer, limited but different to offer. That is, this study from 2021 from anesthesia analgesia practices shows that the Sugammadex administration in a pregnant woman, a case series of maternal and fetal outcomes. This study shows that when used antenatally in pregnancy is controversial, given the concern that for the progesterone binding, because it encapsulates the progesterone as we have already discussed, then it will be very crucial for the maintenance of the pregnancy. The hormone is really, really necessary. So out of 25 pregnant women who received the Sugammadex during the antenatal period, thus highlighting the need for further research into the safety of the Sugammadex during pregnancy. This shows no any detrimental fetal outcomes. This study shows no any detrimental fetal outcomes. The next study from this was a multi-central study from International Journal of Obstetric Anesthesia from 2023. which shows that fetal outcomes with and without the use of the sugammadex in the pregnant patients undergoing non-obstetric surgery, which was a multi-center obstetric study, retrospective study, which shows that when the GA was given with sugammadex or without sugammadex, it does not causes a much difference between the rates of the miscarriage and the preterm birth within the 4 week of pregnancy after the pregnancy was ended. And these findings do not exclude a potential association between the sugammadex exposure during the pregnancy and adverse outcomes of the pregnancy. So there is a missing data, and in the future, more studies and more data is needed for such confirmations that will it be a drug to be used safer in the antenatal period.
15 मिनटां जो आगे क्लास हुआ बदी अच्छा दो
Dr.
Uh,
Masood, kindly please mute your mic.
Sugammadex administration in the pregnant patient undergoing non-obstetric surgery. This is again a study which is showing that six cases of pregnant women were reported in this case series, in which general anesthesia for non-obstetric surgery was given, in which the neuromuscular blockade was reversed with Sugammadex, and then the patient were being followed. So the Sugammadex seemed to be safe option for the mothers and the babies, but more reports are necessary in order to use it very safely and very a bit of with less caution, because the drug is affecting the hormone, and hormone is necessary for the pregnancy. So whenever we are giving it at a period when the progesterone is really really necessary for the pregnancy, then risk versus benefit should be done before giving this drug to the mother. Next, we will be looking for the volatile anesthetic agent. No teratogenic physiological conditions were noted in the animal studies, and from the surveys of the OR personnel and the retrospective analysis of the human pregnant women undergoing GA, we haven't found any increase in the congenital anomalies, yeah, increased risk of congenital anomalies in the these patients using volatile anesthetics. Next, we will be looking into the nitrous oxide. It is controversial to give nitrous in the initial era, but these days it has been proven with that with the volatile agent, nitrous can be used, and the mixture of volatile and the nitrous prevents the teratogenic effect of the nitrous alone. So the animal studies have found teratogenicity by the prolonged use of nitrous oxide when it was used alone, and the etiology was that the nitrous oxide, when used in higher concentrations in the pregnant animals, was able to do the inactivation of the methionine synthetase that affect the DNA synthesis. So administration of volatile agents with the nitrous in the human prevents the teratogenic effects, and the human data comes from the retrospective reviews of the women undergoing surgery and the reproductive outcome in the women with the occupational exposure. So no evidence of increased congenital anomalies have been reported in the humans, and there's weak data that is suggesting the increased risk of spontaneous abortion. And the reason is that the women who were pregnant and were working in the unscavenged environment in the operation theaters, so there was an increased risk of abortion that was spontaneous in nature in these sort of patients. So next we will be looking that uh, there is a fetal outcome and the non-obstetric surgery. So there is no evidence of increased incidence of the congenital anomalies as far as the non-obstetric surgeries is concerned. There is an incidence of spontaneous abortion associated with the non-obstetric surgery. Intrauterine growth retardation may follow after the surgery, and the perinatal mortality is increased when the non-obstetric surgeries and the fetal outcomes are being compared. So the likely etiologies of these conditions that may occur are the surgical procedure, including the site. That is, for the site of the surgery, the risk will increase proportionally if the site of the surgery is closer to the uterus. and the underlying maternal condition, if the mother has underlying condition along with the some indication of the surgery, then there is the likely etiology of the abortion, IUGR, or perinatal mortality. So up till date there is no evidence that what type of anesthesia is better, and the type of anesthesia does not really affect the outcome till the time you are playing quite safe and cautiously, or whenever the plan of anesthesia has been selected. So the next is
ऐसे ही है।
uteroplacental uteroplacental perfusion,
नहीं नहीं, वो ऑफ होता है।
maintenance of
हाँ
uteroplacental perfusion. So maintain normal maternal PO2 will be the goal, and there is the transient decrease is usually well tolerated by the mothers, and prolonged maternal hypoxemia may lead to the fetal death, and maternal hypoxia are not detrimental to the fetus if they are managed well enough. And we have to avoid maternal hypercapnia because it may lead to the fetal acidosis, and which may lead to the myocardial
नहीं, अभी
dysfunction
नहीं
in the
आई,
fetus.
नहीं अभी कुछ नहीं आई, अभी टाइम है ना, और कल फर्स्ट
Ma-
वाला आई है ना।
Maintenance
Kindly
of the
mute your
uteroplacental
mics, please.
perfusion.
Please mute your
वो
mics.
आपके मेडिकल कॉलेज में भेजेंगे,
I would request the
ऑफिशियल लेटर
participant
आएगा
to
ना।
please mute the mic. And next thing we will be
प्रिंसिपल
looking
के
at the
पास आएगा।
maintenance of the uteroplacental perfusion. So we have to
डॉक्टर साहब
avoid
आपका माइक ऑन।
maternal hyperventilation as well. Because maternal hyperventilation will lead to the respiratory alkalosis, and this will lead to the uterine artery vasoconstriction, which will lead to the decreased uteroplacental perfusion, and the shift of the maternal oxyhemoglobin curve to the left, and these things will be detrimental to the fetus. So one have to avoid maternal hyperventilation, and do not forget the pregnancy specific causes of hypotension all the time, that are the aortocaval compression is always there, and if the patient is more than 16 or 20 weeks, then we have to take care of these things as well. And deep anesthesia at lower doses is being occurred in the mothers, so we have to know that there is a mac values which are seemingly decreased, but they have a higher effect in the mothers. So one have to be very very cautious while using the volatile agent, so that you are not putting any impact on the uteroplacental perfusion, and there is no any hypotension. Next, intraoperative fetal monitoring is very, very mandatory while performing surgeries in an obstetric patient, because when to use, when not to use, these decisions will be made collaboratively with the OB unit, OBS and gynae unit, and fetal monitoring is technically possible from 18 weeks onwards, and the site of the surgery may make the fetal monitoring difficult. So, a sterile ultrasound probe can be used during fetal monitoring during surgery, and as we all know that interpreting the fetal heart rate all the time from the fetal monitoring requires the presence of a trained personnel, and which is usually a labor and delivery suit nurse. So these things should be available in your setup in which you are doing surgery. So obs and gynae often does not want to monitor the fetus, because if we are hampering the surgical site, so they may not allow us to do so. So the American College of Gynecology has given a statement that decision to use the intraoperative monitoring should be individualized, and if it is being used, should be based on the gestational age, type of surgery, and the facilities available at your institute. And a survey has reported that 43% of the obstetricians has routinely been using these intraoperative fetal monitoring in the European world, but in Southeast Asia, it is very, very less common that people are using it side by side. But a pre and post operative fetal well-being scans or monitoring is always recommended, and one must be using it whenever dealing with such patients. So, intraoperative fetal monitoring allows optimization of the maternal condition whenever it is required, and is being evident from the fetal compromise. And one must have a plan with surgeon and obstetric people about how to proceed if the evidence of persistent fetal compromise is there. And intraoperative fetal monitoring one must be able to distinguish the effects of the drugs in the fetal hypoxia. For example, if you are perceiving a depressed trace on the intraoperative fetal monitor, but you have just induced the patient with some cardiac depressant drugs. So you must be knowing that the drugs are being causing such thing currently, and one must be making appropriate measure to deal with the immediate effect of the drugs, and then think second of the fetal hypoxia. And one can assess the baseline fetal heart rate and the presence of the decelerations uh, pre, intra, and post surgery. Opioids, induction agents, and inhalation anesthetic agents decreases the fetal heart rate variability, and the vasoactive drugs that causes the maternal tachycardia can produce fetal tachycardia. Reports of the fetal bradycardia with the beta blockers have also been reported. So one must be knowing these things before using intraoperative fetal heart rate monitoring, and remembering that not every decrease in the variability will be directly the consequence of the fetal hypoxia. Next, the non-obstetric surgery comes with the premature labor. So the increased incidence of the preterm and labor and the delivery is there, and the risk factors are the third trimester and the pelvic and the abdominal surgeries, because we are very close to the uterus in these surgeries, and no anesthetic agent or technique has been shown to increase or decrease the preterm labor, and decreased uterine tone caused by the volatile anesthetic agents could be beneficial in such sort of preterm premature labor when premature labor arises. And consider the increased uterine tone caused by the large doses of ketamine, so it should be used very cautiously, and whenever it is required. If the patient is very hypotensive or a traumatic non-obstetric patient undergoing obstetric surgery, and we need to give some ketofol induction or a ketamine induction, always remember to give the dose about 1 milligram per kg or less than 1 milligram per kg, in order to be safe, and do not allow the premature labor or preterm labor to takes place at that moment. So the timing of the non-obstetric surgery really matters. Elective surgery should be delayed until the pregnancy ends, and one must avoid the surgery in the first trimester if possible, because this is the period of organogenesis is happening, and it's a very crucial stage of the pregnancy. So second trimester is the optimal time, because organogenesis have been completed and there is low risk of preterm labor, and most surgery involves serious illnesses, so they cannot be delayed despite gestational age. Whatever the gestational age is, means that emergency surgeries are there. If there is emergency, one has to be very cautious at that moment, and if one cannot delay the surgery, so one must be taking all the consideration in the mind, and one has to proceed when the surgery are emergent or urgent. Next, we will be looking at the anesthetic management of the non-obstetric surgery. That is the pre-operative management. We have to document any pregnancy complication if it is there. Careful assessment of the airway is very important, and obstetric consult should be generated, and it should be in the documentation, and the fetal heart rate and the fetal assessment, fetal tracings should be there, and we should exclude the aspiration by giving aspiration prophylaxis. And these days, gastric focus of the mothers are really in trend, and they're really helpful. You can get a point of care gastric ultrasound, and if there is no any issue in the uh, uh, NPO status is very not recommended, because they are always considered full stomach if they are above the 20 weeks of gestation. But these days, gastric focus really helping the surgeons to deal with the difficult airway, along with the uh, if it comes along with the non-obstetric surgery is going on in an obstetric patient, but the patient has a difficult airway. So gastric focus really allows us that we can or the airway focus can allow us to deal with the situations. And if surgery might trigger the preterm delivery, especially after the 24 to 34 weeks is the time period when the preterm delivery may ensue, then consider antenatal corticosteroids
24 to 48 hours prior to surgery, so that the fetal pulmonary development can occur. So choice of anesthetic technique is the depends on the maternal condition, site and nature of the surgery, patient preference, and regional anesthesia is often preferred by maternal considerations are there, and less fetal drug exposure might be the another cause that one will be avoiding the general anesthesia. But till date, there is no data to support the improved fetal outcome with any specific anesthetic technique. Next, the considerations with the regional anesthesia that we will be focusing on. We should adequately give intravenous fluid for preloading before the neuroaxial anesthesia. Left uterine displacement if more than 20 weeks of gestation are there to abolish the aortocaval compression. Supplemental oxygen should be connected to the mothers every now and then, and aggressive management of the hypertension should be done. And use of sedation is only when necessary, because we want to maintain the airway reflexes and we want to avoid benzodiazepines unnecessarily, because it is a category D drug. And considerations while general anesthesia will be the left uterine displacement, again adequate pre-oxygenation and gastric focus and rapid sequence induction. uh, Difficult intubation algorithms should be in mind when we are dealing with such sort of patients, because they might have a unanticipated difficult airway due to the airway edema of their physiologic changes. Propofol is the preferred induction agent these days, and if ketamine is required, one must be restricting the dose to the maximum limit of 1 milligram per kg. For the post-operative management, we will be monitoring the fetal heart rate and the uterine activity to assess the fetal well-being and to detect any preterm labor. After the initial recovery stay or the PACU stay, extended monitoring on the labor and the delivery suite is also recommended, and the adequate analgesia should be there. Use of paracetamol and opioid is allowed, and NSAID are usually being avoided due to the premature closure of the ductus arteriosus, and the regional analgesia may be preferable. Avoid the effect of the systemic opioids on fetal heart rate variability, and prophylaxis against the thromboembolic event should be considered whenever we are dealing with such patients. So that was all from my side today, and thanks a lot. And now, any questions from the audience are warmly welcomed.
Thank you, Dr. Arsalan, for the nice presentation. So we have some seniors over here. I would request all of my seniors like Dr. Aftab Imtiaz, Dr. Leena Aziz, Dr. Darshna is also here from UK. So because they have Dr. Aziza as well. So they have quite an experience in obstetric anesthesia. I would like to have their comments on this topic as well. Please unmute your mics and then we will have your suggestions or the comments. So before taking the questions from the chat box, I would like to have the comments from the seniors first.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leena here. It was a very, very good presentation. And honestly, it is a nightmare for any anesthetist to do a non-obstetrical surgery for a gravid patient. And all the considerations, by and large, Dr. Aslan has covered. And I think it is really a very, very challenging case for any anesthetist at any stage. Very well presented, I must say.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Leena.
Aslan, what is your experience with local anesthetics for such patients? Do you think you need to give them more of sedation? Because local anesthetic with this condition, these patients are quite anxious. What is your experience?
It depends upon the which procedure we are doing and what are the demands. Because most of the time in my career, I have been through many demands from the patient in a way that again the site of surgery, the type of surgery, the nature of surgery, the reason of surgery, all the things really have an impact on the plan of anesthesia we should be going for such patients. But if there is a surgery when we have both the options, that we can go for neuraxial as well and general as well, then I think as far as the anesthesia personnel, as the anesthetists, we understand that regional really has a lot of less drug exposure to the mother. But when we go on the other side, on the patient's end, most of the female patients of my side, or the Asian population, or in our setup in my city, Karachi, people like to have surgeries when they are under general anesthesia completely, because they are going through all the tough mind setup at that time, that what will be there for the baby, what are the things that many other patient does not want to hear, the critical comments about their ongoing pregnancy. So I think general overall has a very good thing and a very good impact on the patient. But as an anesthetist, if the patients allows me, I would like to give regional where possible. But general really has a good impact on the patient that we really deal with. So I think other seniors will also help me
Salam,
in.
don't you think that general is also very comfortable for the anesthetist in such situations as well? It keeps the
At the
anesthetist
at the
cool as well.
uh, if we go a little back in time, when the general was really a hassle to give in the COVID period, we were about to experience the regional and the comfort of regional. So I think if there is times allows you, and the patients allows you, situation and condition allows you, so regional with some sedation is a good thing. But that yes, of course, this is always a debatable thing. I cannot comment completely that one should be following regional or one should not be going towards the GA. It is really a controversial thing, and I think I cannot completely conclude. But at that time, in many patients, we see a little bit of sedation with regional uh, can be a hassle free thing, just like GA. But not every patient allows. And GA overall has a really good patient satisfaction, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. I think the same way. Well done.
Uh, Thank you so much, Dr. Lina and Dr. Salan. So we also have others as well. Should we go to the comments on the questions directly, or if any other person also wants to suggest or comment on it? We also have Dr. Maqsood Ahmed Siddiqui, and he is also the head of department at the Sakhar Civil Hospital. So, he's also got a vast experience in anesthetizing such kind of a patients. Dr. Maqsood, if you have any comments or suggestions, please unmute your mic so that we can have you. No, we have Darshana
Hello.
Maheshwari as well.
Hello, Arslan. How are you? It was such a nice presentation. Just to add one comment that I know, like, is the BIS monitor role of BIS monitor is in the use of if we are using the total intravenous anesthesia, but even for sevoflurane, if we are giving these patients general anesthesia and we are trying to avoid the awareness and at the same time teratogenic effect of sevoflurane, the uterine relaxation effect of sevoflurane, we can also use the BIS monitor along with using sevoflurane as well, just to give the adequate anesthesia to avoid awareness and maintain the anesthesia rather than overuse of sevoflurane by increasing the MAC. And that will also help. And regarding regional anesthesia and general anesthesia, is not about, the debate is not which is safe, is all to have to maintain the perfusion pressure, avoid hypoxia, and avoid the teratogenic drugs. That's the most important. And again, the pain relief, that by using the regional anesthesia technique where possible, we can avoid the we can control the better pain relief by avoiding the many other teratogenic drugs.
Yes, exactly. Right, well, very well said by Dr. Darshana that we can use BIS as well, and the different type of blocks on the, for example, tab blocks and rectal sheath blocks after the surgery really helps mother, and they are totally opioid free, and they really have no any systemic effects on the fetus after the surgery, and it really is a matter that we have to make the thing very clear in our mind that the mother and the fetus should be safe, and after the delivery they should continue their developmental journey safely. Rather, the debate over the spinal and general is all about the safety of the mother and the fetus, and good comments added by Dr. Darshana. Thanks a lot.
Can I intervene, Arsalan? Hello?
Yes,
Can I
please.
Yeah. So I have a comment on that in respect to what Darshana has just mentioned. Definitely, it is always better to have as maximum monitoring as possible. But living in Pakistan and in a low, middle income country, BIS is actually quite expensive. For one time BIS monitoring, it costs around 10,000 Pakistani rupees, which can be quite bothersome for some of the patients and can be quite expensive for the others. And at the same time, most of the procedures which such kind of obstetric patients are undergoing are usually of shorter duration. So applying BIS monitor in a very smaller duration of a procedure, in which it is actually not even required, can cause trouble to the patient, as well as it can increase the cost as well. So actually you have to gauge which kind of a surgery is proceeding. If it is a very prolonged kind of a surgery in which BIS is really required, in which monitoring is like awareness is really required, then definitely this is an option. But otherwise, in smaller kind of a procedures which are non-obstetric but are of very smaller duration, like for 15 minutes or 20 minutes duration, then definitely this might not be of that much of help. So that was just a comment on me from my side.
Yeah.
And now we
uh,
will be taking
Very
the
true.
questions.
Excuse me, can I add one thing, please?
Yes,
What
please.
about the
Yes.
consent, special consent or consent regarding these patients who have to undergo the surgery, both for the family as well as from the patient? How important it would be
yes,
for the
exactly.
the medical legal aspect?
Yes, exactly. Proper consenting and proper things are really important, because I was when I was making yeah, today's presentation, I go through many things that first of all I would like to add that consent is really important, and there is always a possibility that preterm labor or any fetal or maternal detrimental consequences can occur. So consent is really important, and it should be explained in very detail to the patient, so that no any mishap is occurring without proper documentation and consenting. And secondly, the use of BIS, as far as Dr. Darshana Maheshwari has mentioned. So when I was going through the things that if you are in a very well developed country, then you have to have as many monitors as possible. But if you are going through in a setup that where there is a BIS is available, but it requires a special cost, and the setup is not that well maintained. So I have gone through that when people are going when these patients are going for some repairs that these days cardiac repairs have for the fetus are being done intrauterine in the third trimester, or so, a bit quite 2 weeks before delivery. So they are using these things because these procedures took quite a long period, intrauterine fetal correction of their heart anomalies. So there was a role of BIS exactly very well mentioned by Dr. Darshana as well, and that was I think that is really necessary. And second thing, consent is also very important, and one must not proceed without in any sort of surgery, but these surgeries require a special consenting with the family as well.
Dr. Lena, does that answers your query?
Just to add, Arslan and you all, that it's not only that these tutorials, not only that how we clinically manage, but what are available options we should all know theoretically as well. Just for the exam and exam point of view, that because everybody nowadays giving
Definitely.
exams from the different part of the world, and these are very important tools to remember. Just to add on the some extra points, that we know we are very like in Pakistan are very things are very limited resource country, so we have to be vigilant that how much and the most of the cost patient has to pay. So we have to be vigilant what we are using, but theoretically we should all know that what are the other possible options which we can use.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for pointing this out. So we'll be taking the questions from the participants in the chat box. Dr. Abdur Rahman Qureshi has asked, how would you proceed for appendicitis in the first trimester and the last trimester, and what technique would you prefer?
Again, the question will be answered by the same sort of this thing has been already discussed in the slide as well, but I would again mention that uh, in the question he has specified two specific timings, so the both of the specific timings have a different impact, and then we will be seeing what is the week of pregnancy that is currently going on, and what is it more than 20 or less than 20, and if it is more than 20, so we will be considering the risk of aspiration more. Some studies says 16 weeks has a more risk of aspiration, and whatever the patient and the condition and the things will decide, we will be going through. And as appendicitis has different things as well, that whether is it open or is it laparoscopic. So general anesthesia is a preferable option in most of the situations whenever we are going for a patient who is having appendicitis. And when the risk of aspiration are more, one should be more vigilant, and that is the week of the pregnancy. If it is 16, or some studies are very controversial about these things, that 16 weeks are there or 20 weeks are there, but the anesthetic should be vigilant. So for 16 weeks onward, you will be doing an RSI with the general anesthesia for such patients, in my perspective, and this would be much safer option. Again, the pre and post op fetal scans should be there, and the proper consenting should be there. So I hope I answered the question, because in the third trimester there is always a risk of aspiration, and one must be doing the gastric focus. The preference should be given to the RSI. So I hope I answered the question.
And what is safe for sedation in such kind of patients?
In such kind of patient, if you know that you have to use a sedative, and it can be going from the mother's body in a period of total elimination will be in 6 hours or 4 hours. So one can use safely in these sort of patients the opioids and the other things, but repetitive dosing of midazolam is not very well, and it's quite controversial, but single doses does not matter. So one must be knowing that the fetal delivery is a bit later, and if there things are there that we are giving a patient sedation and the preterm labor ensues, one should be using the sedative doses, and should be using propofol and other things, that so that they does not have a effect on the delivered baby.
Right. Dr. Aftab, do you have to say, or do you have any comments for Dr. Salan or for the lecture?
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. And the main consensus to avoid the teratogenic drugs and to maintain the uterine blood flow and placental circulation during any kind of anesthesia, whether regional or general. An excellent presentation by Arsalan.
Thank you so much for your comments. So Dr. Muhammad Ali has also asked, what is the role of dexmedetomidine and the pregnancy safety, in pregnancy and safety?
Dexmedetomidine can be given, but it causes both the things. As we all know that it will cause maternal brady and maternal hypotension. So with proper fetal heart rate monitoring, one can be using these things, and one can use it. but the fetal heart rate monitoring should be there, so that in any event of hypotension, maternal hypotension, or some fetal heart rate variability, things can be managed easily. Dex can be used in maternal patient,
And
but
dexmedetomidine, is it is it safe for the fetus, or is it teratogenic, or is it not?
Dexmedetomidine is totally a newer drug, and frankly speaking, I have not seen this drug being used in my personal practice, so I cannot comment. And there are multiple people who are in the forum. If they have used in the these population, they can ask us. But as far as the things are concerned, we have given it intrathecally in some study to lower the shivering in the mothers, and it really has a good effect. And at that time, we found out that Dex can be used in maternal patients, and it is also a class B or C drug. It is not X or D. It is not a X or D drug. You can use it.
Right.
It's a
So, so literature is available on the intrathecal use of dexmedetomidine, along with the intravenous use of dexmedetomidine as well, and the studies have shown that it can be used
Yes,
safely
it
in
can be
such
used
kind of.
safely in this population. Yes.
Right. And what about the antibiotics and the NSAIDs in pregnant females? This is asked by
And,
Dr. Shahdar. He was a very good colleague
and
of ours who works at Gurki Trust Hospital. Uh,
Uh, I welcome him as well, and nice question by him, because NSAIDs are possible can possibly can cause premature closure of ductus arteriosus. So one should be avoiding it when it is not required. And these days, the recommendations are being that the analgesia of
अच्छा सीधा करना है सीधा करना है
uh, Dr. Aftab, can you please mute your mic?
oh sorry
Yes, Dr. Arsalan. Dr. Arsalan, are you still with us?
yes, yes. Sorry. Now I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible.
And NSAID should
Can
be
someone
avoided.
mute
And
Dr. Aftab's mic, please? I think he's in the OR and he's unable to.
NSAID can cause premature closure of ductus arteriosus, so it should not be given in such populations. And for analgesia, one can use paracetamol, opioids, or local anesthetic in the blocks, different blocks, so that the patient can have potent and uh, up to the mark analgesia. But NSAID should be avoided when other things are available, and more data is to come still, that one should be not using NSAID, and there are multiple studies as well on this topic, that NSAIDs can cause premature closure of ductus arteriosus.
Right. So I'll just quickly have another question, and then we are ahead of time. So, Dr. Ruxana Begum has asked, how would you manage the pain in head, neck, thoracic surgery where pain might be moderate or severe, and what are the options and timings in consideration of the fetal heart with the opioid administration in such kind of patients?
Again, we can give opioid if the delivery is still awaited, and 6 to 8 hours are there for the delivery. So we can consider opioid, but for such patients, if the surgical site and the incision is allowing, one should be giving a scalp block to the mother, because we know that local anesthetic these days, and you can mix dexamethasone with the ropivacaine or the bupivacaine in order to give a good and a 24-hour block to the patient. You can use a scalp block in such head surgeries, and patient really had a good analgesic effect, and with the addition of dexamethasone, 24 hours has been observed by different studies as well. So you can use a scalp block
I think
along with
her question
paracetamol.
is more towards non-surgical pain, like the pain in the head and the neck region where the pain is quite severe and the patient requires any kind of analgesia, most likely the
And
opioids.
then
For
simply,
example, if the patient needs acute pain management for that, not proceeding for surgery, not undergoing anything
most of the
else.
time, many pain consultants, many pain physicians just go and see the directory. If the drug is under B or C and there's time and delivery, you can use the drug. But if the drug is D or X, it is not allowable to use it. So most of the time, people are going through some things and they are going to if the headache is not getting off from the paracetamol or the acetaminophen, whatever you say, that it is not being controlled with that thing, then special considerations and special pain consultation should be there. And if the patient needs a block, you can put a block. But other thing, that opioids that are being regularly being used by the mother and that are not required, for example, it is not permissible by the, I think, American College and of obstetric and gynecology is saying that till the time for a particular diagnosed disease, the patient does not require continuous analgesia to be continued in the pregnancy, because every drug has an effect on the patient. So most of the thing there is paracetamol, and for other things special consideration and consultations is advised, especially.
Actually, for any kind of a patient who is presenting with pains, the first thing to do is to do the assessment. The If you know the
Exactly,
reason or the cause
assessment.
of the patient's pain, then definitely the treatment is according to the cause, not only that you have to give the opioid. So that's not the only option, but as Dr. Arsalan has just mentioned, there are other modalities which can also be used. But definitely, the first thing first is to do the examination and to take a full history and to know the cause. Once you know the cause, then you have to treat the cause accordingly.
Yes,
And then
exactly. Yes.
just a final comment from Dr. Farzeen, which is actually a comment, and she's asking your experience on using the erector spiny block in an obstetric patient undergoing MRM, because she just had got a case done of a 6-month pregnant women undergoing mastectomy.
So sadly for Dr. Farzeen, I have not got a chance to get a MRM operated while a patient is being pregnant. But many other surgeries I have witnessed and I have practiced on such population. So anybody in the group who have done a mastectomy on such patient can give their opinion. But I think Pack 1, Pack 2, erector spiny, all the blocks are available there. And if I have got a chance, so exactly what we are discussing on the forum for quite a time now, that special consenting, if the patient is allowing, one can practice the block where that is available for that particular region, because PNBs really make a difference these days, because post-op course will be much easier with the block rather that. But in my personal experience, I have never get a chance to for a patient who is undergoing mastectomy with an in an obstetric patient who is going under mastectomy. So I hope I might get a chance, and then I will share my experiences.
Yes, but for the sake of the audience knowledge and for their information as well, erector spiny block can be given in not actually only erector spiny block, but any kind of a block can be done in such patients who are undergoing
Yes,
non-obstetric procedure.
whenever
So,
when yes.
yes, Dr. Salan, you wanted to comment.
Yes. I want to add a comment that whenever you get a chance to make your obstetric patient who is going under non-obstetric surgery pain-free via a peripheral nerve block, I think it is the most luckiest thing that you can have, because one has to at this forum, all the people are from the anesthesia fraternity, and we all know that what will be the difference. At these days, we are practicing the enhanced recovery protocols, and wherever you can plot a block, that will be the lucky thing for the patient and you as well, I think. So that was I would want to add.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salan, for this discussion and for the talk you have just given to us, and for the latest updates as well. And I'm really grateful to all the participants who have been present here and also gave their suggestions and the comments. We really appreciate your presence in the online lecture series. Thank you so much. Kindly fill in the feedback form. The link is given in the chat box. and so that the e-certificates can be sent to you. And thank you so much. Hope to see you in next 2 weeks with another speaker. Dr. Sadia Noor will be the coordinator for this module. She's our Joint Secretary, Pakistan Society of Anesthesiologists. So we also welcome her in the forum and also on the online lecture series. And thank you, everyone. Have a nice day. Thank you. Or night. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Dr. I have shared the feedback form in the chat box. Kindly fill that.